So Joe Biden still leads in the polls, although there's a new poll where Bernie Sanders has finally overtaken him in New Hampshire.
About time.
Good.
New Hampshire.
About time.
If you're a New Hampshire person and you're listening to this and you're not actively working to get Bernie Sanders elected, you need to stop listening to this podcast.
Turn this off and get going for Bernie. But the Biden campaign has also been saying basically that Iowa is not make or break, I believe, is the kind of indications that are coming out, which is a very bad sign if they're doing that this far out from the caucuses.
It's so far out.
If he loses Iowa and New Hampshire, this is really an entirely different dynamic. I mean, look, South Carolina is a very strong state for Joe Biden, and I wouldn't count him out. And in fact, I still, just because I want to be cautious about this, because I really do think people were kind of naive about his appeal coming out of the gate and underestimated it. If he has a decent debate performance tonight, there's the narrative for the next several weeks, because he's been getting beaten up on for a long time. He hasn't looked good. If he can pull it together, like, your analysis should not be predicated on the fact that he's definitely going to collapse. Unfortunately, that's not true, as much as we all very much want it to be true. That being said, I mean, you talk about, like, the establishment is held together by glue and gum. The fact that Joe Biden, who really clearly might not be physically, mentally up for doing this, in addition to having a decades-long terrible record in all of the key issues, as well as things like the bankruptcy bill, they are still talking electability as just on a performance level that becomes increasingly questionable. Here's Richard Haass. He's the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and they're talking with the Morning Joe team about the electability argument.
And to either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders.
The other possibility is Joe Biden does really well. And for Democrats, that is the best bet, because it's going to be pretty hard for an Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris to establish that comfort level with perhaps the people who voted for Trump, who need a place to go, who won't do it again. They'll vote for Biden. I'm not sure they'll vote for anyone else in the Democratic field.
Well, you know,
and so the hope for the Democrats, the best hope, is that Biden gets really strong on the stage.
What Donald Trump's team thinks is, even if they don't vote for Biden, right?
Yeah.
They will stay home thinking, well, Biden isn't a, quote, socialist. Biden is not going to take away my family's health insurance.
Right.
Biden is not going to make us
comfort level.
Like find a new pediatrician for our children. Biden is not going to decriminalize illegal immigration, all of these things. So they go, I'm not going to vote for the guy, but I can't vote for Donald Trump either. The guy's just acted too crazy. I'm going to stay at home, and would be one of those
Biden's the best case scenario for the Democrats.
Whereas with Elizabeth Warren, they believe whether it's with Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, they will actually motivate people who are skeptical on Trump to go out and vote. And I think a lot of Democrats, certainly behind the scenes, agree with that analysis.
Coming up a lot.
So I have no doubt that Democrats behind the scenes believe that analysis. Democrats who thought that you could shutter the Think for Progress blog, basically replace it with scabs and nobody would notice. There's a lot of people who would talk to Joe Scarborough on background who are identified with the Democratic Party who are more out of touch with reality than Donald Trump. And I just want to say, I mean, this projection, and look, there is no question that there might be some people who get freaked out by the socialism word. There's a ton of areas that Elizabeth Warren is vulnerable on, including ones that she should be vulnerable on and ones that are frankly just misogyny. But this is like the quintessential clip of the projection of the media class with normal voters. The people who flipped from Obama to Trump, that have not either just become right-wing reactionary crackpots and are now Republicans, or people who are totally disaffected, which might be a thing. The key distribution of a couple 100,000 people, maybe even less, in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan voted for Trump. And the polling bears this out if you get into the details of the polling, because of promises on economic questions. And if you look at what the center is in the country, even what the center is in the United Kingdom, for God's sake, it is to the right on social issues, to the left on economic issues. Period. These people's assertions are their own psychological needs and projections. This is what they will do. But fortunately for us, Bernie Sanders doesn't need to win Westchester. He doesn't need to win the MSNBC green room. He needs to win Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, which he is better positioned to do than any other candidate besides possibly Joe Biden. And Joe Biden can be picked apart for voting for every single trade agreement that has decimated these states, for voting for and pushing through the bankruptcy bill that has gutted millions of Americans' lives, and for various other key corporate assaults on the very people that these delusional, moronic, crazy ghouls claim to be speaking for.
Yeah. Mika and Joe, here's a hot take. Has no more informational value than Diamond and Silk.
Oh, snap.
Totally.
No, that's
and
definitely
far
true.
less entertainment value.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to add, we've been going back and forth a lot about whether people all voted for Trump out of racism or economic anxiety, right? And I think, probably on balance, it's more racism. But the people who did vote for Trump out of economic anxiety are all in those swing states. And I would hope if someone can speak to their class interests in the way that Bernie does and show how much Trump's promises are garbage, that they can come along. And it doesn't mean changing on any of these social issues. It doesn't mean that the Democrats are going to get more racist. It means that we're going to speak to their economic interests and say we don't want any of that other nonsense.
And none of them are talking about compromising. In fact, of course, Bernie's put forward strong issues on things like civil rights. But the other really important thing to mention, because they only go with what will depress turnout, if you look at the maps of the counties that went Obama to Trump in terms of donor base, it's Bernie. Small dollar donations from counties that went from Obama to Trump, Bernie dominates in terms of donations.
And also, I also want to mention that there is the X factor that Biden does not have, which is all of the people who don't normally vote. All of the people who did not turn out last time around, who could maybe be persuaded to turn out this time around if somebody speaks to their economic interests. And those people are by and large poorer. They're by and large less white than the people who currently vote. So hopefully Bernie has a case to be made there.
Absolutely.